Hello, my name is Katrina Zeno, and I live in the United States. And I've been privileged to travel the world for over 20 years, speaking and teaching on the writings of St. John Paul II. In fact, in 2011, I had the joy of speaking in various locations in Slovakia and getting to know this part of the world better. Although I didn't make it to Lithuania, perhaps someday I'll visit this beautiful country, God willing, if this video series is successful and Father Rasto can work it out. So maybe I'll meet you in person someday. So then why am I creating this video series entitled Living in the Glory, Especially for You? Because we are pilgrims on a common journey, a journey in which we want to know that our lives matter. Just think for a moment. If tomorrow you disappeared from the face of the earth, would it make a difference? Would anyone notice? Would your absence leave behind a gaping hole in the lives of others? And, most importantly, in the history of your country and the world? The answer is yes. Yes. You matter. Your life is significant. The choices you make impact the lives of others and the world. Just think for a moment about the life of St. John Paul II, or any other saint, or a national hero. St. John Paul II's life, growing up in Poland as young Karol Wojtyła, was hidden and insignificant. He was the second son of an ordinary married couple, and by the way, his mother was of Lithuanian descent, and his family was just trying to survive after the Great War, World War I. St. John Paul II's childhood was unremarkable. He went to school, he loved to play soccer, he went to church, and then everything changed when Germany invaded Poland. Did you know that Karol and his father tried to escape Poland by foot? Their lives constantly in danger, but they had to turn back because his father was too fragile to continue. Did you know that Karol was hit by a truck and thrown unconscious into a ditch where he could have died if he hadn't been found by people walking by on the street? As a young adult, Karol's life was constantly in danger as he participated in an illegal drama group. He met with others to pray. He entered the underground seminary and studied secretly. Think about it. Who would have noticed if one day he'd just disappeared from the face of the earth? The answer is the whole world. Karol Wojtyła finished his seminary studies, was ordained a priest, studied in Rome, and then returned to Poland, where he eventually was appointed an assistant bishop of Krakow in 1958. Okay, here's where his story gets exciting. Well, maybe you already know all this, but I think it's worth telling again. When the Archbishop of Krakow died, a new bishop was needed. Okay, now in those days, an agreement between the communist government and the Polish church required the Polish church to submit names to the government for approval for any bishop's position. So in order to replace the Archbishop of Krakow, the Church of Poland had submitted 7 names of priests to be ordained as Archbishop of Krakow, and the communists rejected every single one of them. Why? Well, it's because they were waiting for Bishop Karol Wojtyła's name to be presented. Since, and here's what's fascinating, they thought he was a kind of intellectual philosopher who would be politically weak, and therefore someone they could influence and manipulate and control. So finally, Bishop Wojtyła's name was presented, the communist government approved it, and they were dead wrong. Archbishop Wojtyła became a tireless advocate for the dignity of the human person. He fought for your dignity. He battled for the human right to religious freedom. He fought for your religious freedom. And he proclaimed the need for our moral conscience to be formed in truth and not through propaganda. He fought for your right to know the truth that will set you free. And Archbishop Wojtyła was eventually elected Pope John Paul II on October 16, 1978, and he served as Pope for 27 years until he died on April 2nd, 2005. Here's what I think is amazing. God was already at work in his life. Even though the whole world had no idea who Karol Wojtyła was. Have you ever had an experience in your life that you thought it wasn't really significant, only later you realized God was already working at that precise moment in your life, even though you didn't realize it? Well, I had one of those experiences in June of 1992. Okay, that month, which was almost 30 years ago now, my son Michael and I were visiting Rome during the week of my son's 5th birthday, and we received permission to attend Pope John Paul II's private morning mass. So early in the morning of June 16, 1992, we participated in Pope John Paul II's private morning mass along with about 50 other people in his private chapel. Afterwards, everyone was ushered into a large audience hall, and Pope John Paul II came along and he greeted each group of visitors. And since our group was only my son and myself, the Pope approached me and my son, who was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, wearing an adorable little small red bow tie, handed the Pope a small book entitled Titles of Mary. And here is one of my most favorite photos in the whole wide world. Here's my son handing that little book to Pope John Paul II. And right after this, the Pope bent down and he kissed my son. Okay, I think that makes my son a third-class relic, since John Paul II is now a saint. Then what happened is John Paul II looked at me and I said, "We're from Steubenville." And it didn't seem to register. So I tried again. I said, "We're from Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio." And I saw the light go off in his eyes. And he reached out and he placed his hand on my forehead and he blessed me. And in that moment, I experienced receiving a portion of his spirit. Well, at the time, as I said, it was in the early 1990s. I hate to admit it, but I really didn't know much about Pope John Paul II, and I had never read anything he wrote. Not only that, at that time my identity was completely broken and shattered from the recent experience of a painful divorce. You see, it was only later that I realized that God was already at work in a very significant way by pouring out in me, by infusing me with the spirit of this great saint in anticipation of the worldwide theology of the body mission that God would later entrust to me. So what about you? Can you think of a time in your life when God was already acting even though you didn't realize how significant it would be at the time? Maybe when you were younger, you felt the closeness of God in a special way. Or perhaps you had a close friend or an aunt or a grandparent or godfather or godmother who made you feel very special and loved. Or maybe you've experienced a deep pain or sadness from divorce like I did. Or maybe you've experienced tension within your family, maybe from addiction. Or perhaps you've experienced a romantic relationship that broke your heart. Perhaps you had a job opportunity that you lost and very upset about, or that you felt overwhelmed by the darkness of depression or shame. And in these situations, you've wondered, where is God in the midst of all this? Maybe you've even been tempted to turn your back on God, like, I'm done with you, because he seemed absent, or because you don't like all the church rules, or because freedom, the freedom that the world offers, seems to sound a whole lot more fun than being Catholic or a Christian believer. You know what? I can assure you, Even if it doesn't seem like it, God is at work in your life right now. He wants you to know that your life matters, that you are significant to God and to the world, and that God wants you to know Him and to live in His glory. Why? Because a wise saint, Saint Irenaeus, once said, "The glory of God is man fully alive." You are a human person, and God desires you to know His glory so that you can be fully alive. That's what this video series is about. So please click on the next video to discover a little bit more about glory and what it is and what it isn't. And remember, you are created for the glory of God.